In this series of tutorials, we're going to look at how to build basic AI using Playmaker and Unity. The first step is going to be to create a player-controlled object that'll move around the scene based on where the player clicks and be able to navigate around obstacles. Let's go ahead and get started by setting up our scene. First thing I'm going to do is add in a plane for our character to move around on. I'm going to create 3D object and plane. I'm going to scale that up in the inspector to 2, 2, and 2. In order for this to work with the navigation system, we're going to have to mark it as static. On the top right of our inspector, we can toggle static. If I hit the down arrow, I can see there's lots of different ways of being static. The most important for this example is the navigation static, but we can leave them all on. Next, I go to my window menu and go down to navigation. You can see there's lots of different options here: object, bake, areas. What we're mostly interested in is just the bake button down at the bottom right. We're going to hit that button, and that'll bake a navigation mesh. And now you can see that our plane has got a light blue mesh added on top of it. This light blue mesh defines the area where our navigation mesh agents can travel. Let's make this a little bit more interesting and add in some obstacles. If I right click on my plane, add a 3D object and a cube. And I'm going to stretch that, make a wall out of it. Maybe I'll duplicate that. Give our character something to walk around. Now, if you notice, our navigation mesh hasn't updated with the addition of these cubes. Anytime you add an obstacle or you change your terrain, you're going to have to rebake your navigation mesh. In order for an obstacle to be recognized by the navigation system, we also have to mark that as static. So let's select both of our cubes, go to our inspector, and select the static toggle. Then back into our navigation window and hit bake at the bottom right. You can now see there's been holes cut into our navigation mesh, and that'll prevent our navigation mesh agents from getting too close to the walls. Let's continue setting up our scene. Let's move our camera a little bit. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, select my camera, and under Game Object, I'm going to go to Align with View. I can get my camera preview here, make a little bit of adjustments, see if I can get that whole scene in there. Good enough. Now you can see my camera preview, I can't really see much of anything. That's because I don't have a directional light. So I'm going to go to Create, Light, and add a directional light. If I go back to my game view, I can now see my obstacles, and I can see my plane. It's a little hard to see, so I'm going to add in some materials to add in some color. So going back to my scene view, I'm going to my project, and I've already created these two materials. And you can see in the inspector, they're just standard shaders with the albedo channel tinted a little bit. And I'm going to drop the obstacle material onto my walls and the terrain material onto the plane. Back to my game view, I can see that this is a little bit easier to look at and see what's going on. The next thing we need to do is add our character. So I'm going to go to Create, 3D Object, and add a capsule. Take a little bit of time to align that, go to orthographic mode, and make sure that that object's on top of my plane. And I want to make sure that it's on the navigation mesh and not on one of the obstacles. I can get my navigation mesh to reappear by clicking on the navigation window. If I click on a different window, it'll disappear. Back in perspective mode, and that's good enough. In order for this object to work with the navigation mesh, we have to add a navigation mesh agent. So in the inspector, making sure that you're clicked on your capsule, go to Add Component and type in Nav. Nav mesh agent is the one we want to add. The next piece we need to add is an FSM. Hit Add Component and type FSM. Playmaker FSM, and I'm going to rename this FSM Player Controller. I'm going to push Edit, and that'll open up my Playmaker window. We're going to need two states. The first state's going to watch for a mouse button click, and the second state's going to set our destination. So I'm going to add a second state by right-clicking, Add State, and I'm going to rename the state Set Destination. And I'm going to rename the first state listener. In my first state, I need to add an action that's going to watch for the mouse button to be pushed. So I click Action Browser. I'm going to search for mouse. The command I'm looking for is Get Mouse Button Down. Double click. That'll add it to my state. And we can see that I can choose my button, left, right, middle. I'm going to stick with the left. And it'll allow me to call an event. So let's add that event. I'm going to call it mouse clicked. And then I'm going to add that transition to my state, mouse clicked, and link it to the set destination. Then back under the state in the Get Mouse Button Down action, I'm going to set the mouse click event. Now, that'll move us to the set destination, but it's not actually going to move the object. To do that, we need another mouse command. We need to know where the mouse is on the screen. And we're going to use this command called mouse pick. Double click on that, and that'll add it into our state. And what this mouse pick event does is something called ray casting, and it's going to cast a ray from where the camera is to where the mouse cursor is. The ray cast event allows us to detect any objects. What we want to know first off is where that cursor is. Where did we click so that we can move our object to that point? That's going to happen here with the store point option. We're going to be able to store wherever that mouse was. So we're going to need a new variable to store that. Click on Variables. We're going to go to Variable Type and Vector 3. It's going to store a 3-dimensional position. And I'm going to rename this mouse position. Go back to my state. Under Store Point, I'm going to choose mouse position. Okay. Now we need to tell the nav mesh agent where to go. It's going to go to this mouse position. So go back to your hierarchy, click on Capsule and the inspector. We're going to drag that nav mesh agent into our state, like so. And we're going to set a property. Under Options here, under Property, open that up, and we're going to be looking for our destination. And we're going to set it as a vector 3. And hit the equal sign, which will allow me to assign a variable. So I can set the value to that mouse position. Now we don't need to do this every frame. It's only going to happen when the mouse button gets clicked. So let's see what happens. Now if I click, the object will move around the obstacle and come to where I've clicked. But you'll notice that if I click in other places, I'm not able to move those new places because my FSM is stuck in this state. So let's fix that. Exit play mode. And on the set destination state, I'm going to add one more action. Clicking on my action browser again. And I'm going to add the action send event. We're going to create a new event. We'll call that player moved. And add that transition. And that's going to go back to our listener state. And then in our state, down this send event action, we're going to choose this newly created event, player moved. Let's try that. Let's see what happens. Now if I click, the object still follows, but I can click multiple times and the object will go wherever I've clicked. So that is it for our first video. Next time we'll be working on creating the enemy AI that'll be able to detect our player and hunt them down. Thanks for joining.